Hello everyone. So when I do these videos, it takes a considerable amount of research to get down to the facts on both sides of the issue. Generally what we read in the news media is essentially a spin of the story that they're trying to give us to shape our thinking. So as I was doing the previous couple of videos, I stumbled upon another case. Actually, there's two cases. In this video I'll talk about the first one, and the subsequent one I'll bring up the other one. And they both happen to be at West Point, U.S. Military Academy at West Point, New York. And so this case was about Colonel Anthony Bianchi, somebody who has an illustrious career in the Army. Graduated in 1997 from West Point. Evidently played football there. Was an artillery officer, commanded an artillery battalion, served in Afghanistan and Iraq. Recipient of the Bronze Star, and also other commendations. So the guy is essentially shit hot. So they make him the garrison commander. In July of 2023, there's a West Point football alumni function. Since he played football as an alumni, he attended that function. This is where the story kind of gets a little muddy. So he drives a government-owned vehicle to the event, okay, and he goes to the event and he's going through the food line, and the meat carving guy evidently gives him a plate of meat that he didn't like. So him and the meat carving guy exchange some words, and he basically says, "Do you know who I am?" Blah blah blah. The meat carving guy says, "It doesn't matter who you are. You're a client, customer. I treat everybody equally." So Colonel Bianchi didn't like the slice of meat he got. Evidently there's too much fat in the meat, and he got a little irritated by it. The meat carving guy gets frightened because the colonel lashed out at him and calls the MPs. So the MPs show up to the event, and they go up and seek the colonel out, and he's got this drink in his hand. So the MP notices that drink. But, in the MP's statement, he states that the colonel wasn't inebriated or intoxicated. Nonetheless, Bianchi leaves Eisenhower Hall, where the event was taking place, and evidently goes to the Thayer Hotel on West Point. And there he has a couple of drinks. He leaves the Thayer Hotel in the government-owned vehicle again, and goes out the gate of the Thayer gate. And there's the same MPs there. He stops and says, "Hey, everything okay?" MP said, "Yes, sir. Be safe tonight." And he pulls off, but there's a stop sign at the gate that he doesn't stop through because he evidently talked with the MPs. So he just drives right through the stop sign. The MP all of a sudden notices the government-owned vehicle and the fact that he remembers it's the same MP that this guy was drinking at the function. So he calls on the radio. He says, "Hey, we got an issue here. I saw this guy drinking, but he wasn't intoxicated, and he's driving a government-owned vehicle." So the MP started looking for this vehicle. 2 hours later, they find the vehicle at Bianchi's house. So, MPs being sergeants, they can't go into an officer's house. So they call in for some senior personnel. So his deputy shows up. The provost marshals, they all show up, and they go into this Bianchi's house, wake him up, and says, "Hey, you got to come downstairs." They come downstairs and they said, "You got to give a breathalyzer," and Bianchi refuses. So they said, "Okay, fine." So they detain him. They take him to the provost marshal's office, and there the provost marshal gives him a direct order that you have to take the breathalyzer test. "I'm giving you an order; you have to take it." Bianchi refuses, and so consequently, this thing blows up the next day. Everybody hears about it, and Bianchi gets relieved of command. So the saga continues for about 13 months, and there's a assimilative clause where it says that state laws, the driving laws, can on federal land, can go to federal court. So rather than this thing going to a court-martial or administrative hearing, this whole issue about him being drunk and disorderly, not stopping at a stop sign, and using the government-owned vehicle, it goes to the federal court. At the federal court, Colonel Bianchi wins the case. They throw out the drunk and disorderly charge, and they basically get him for not stopping at the stop sign, and they fine him like $150, and so he's found guilty of that in federal court. So then, in the meantime, he puts in his retirement papers and he retires. So here's the issue I have with what just transpired, right? So what just transpired was it was a rush to judgment in relieving this officer, right? Before the matter was adjudicated, either in military judicial system or the federal judicial system. So we ruined this guy's career, basically forced him out of the Army. Now, I obviously don't know too much about the Army. I accept that. But the point being, as a garrison commander at a prestigious location like West Point, U.S. Military Academy, you got to be pretty shit hot. They just don't take any snuffy like me and say, hey, we're going to make you a garrison commander. So that's one issue. The second issue in this whole matter is, put aside all this thing, okay? He was drinking and driving in a government-owned vehicle. He had an incident with the civilian employee. I understand that. Could he have been charged with conduct unbecoming an officer? Perhaps. In my view, this whole matter wasn't handled correctly. I certainly look forward to your thoughts. So what do you think about it? But if they had handled this matter correctly, by the same token, barging into somebody's house and waking him up and saying, hey, you got to take a breathalyzer test is unacceptable also. You wouldn't do that to a troop? Or maybe they would. I don't know. And the reason being is it's not going to hold up in court, right? Because the guy was home for 2 hours. He could have very easily said, hey, I came home and I had a couple drinks. But the colonel did admit to drinking. He admitted to that. And they saw him driving the vehicle, so we know he was drinking and driving. And he was driving a government-owned vehicle on a personal function, right? So those are the sticking points. But they went off on tangent to try to get him on drunk and disorderly and going through a stop sign. So this is yet another example how we don't apply the UCMJ equally across the military, amongst the senior officers, the mid-level officers, and staff NCOs, and the junior troops. So that's one issue. The second issue is the reason the UCMJ came about in 1950, 1951 was because each service had their own rules and regulations. And these rules and regulations were being abused and in many cases were extremely harsh. So Congress decided we're going to have a uniform code of military justice that applies to everybody. So after 1951, everybody was held accountable under the UCMJ. You just couldn't get away with stuff. But the problem is this. What's happened is, what the UCMJ now is, it's been weaponized in many cases. In my opinion, the two most dangerous entities in the military is a JAG, Judge Advocate General, right? Because these guys are chartered with applying the UCMJ in an equitable manner and safeguarding the rights of the accused. And that doesn't really happen all the time. So that's one. And the other one is this public affairs officer. These guys are just propagandists. They're walking around spinning stories and spinning lies to safeguard the reputation of the institution rather than ensuring that the truth comes out. And there have been so many cases that I'm personally aware of where between the JAG and the PAO, they've mishandled many cases, which otherwise wouldn't be a big deal. And we can go into that quite a bit. How the 3 MARSOC Marines just most recently were acquitted, the Navy SEAL cases, and whatnot. So the military, it's important that the Uniform Code of Military Justice is applied equitably across the board. And so incidents like this Col Bianchi, now granted, I don't agree with him with drinking and driving a government-owned vehicle. Yeah, he was wrong, absolutely wrong. But then charge him for it, right? And I don't agree with, I wasn't there. I didn't go through the child line with him, so I don't know what kind of cut of meat he got. But Jesus, man. I mean, but seriously, you're a colonel. And there's no point you getting in a pissing contest with a meat carver about the type of meat you got. Put the plate down and go through the line again, or ask him nicely, hey, may I have another cut of meat? Instead of saying, do you know who I am? So it's important that the application of the UCMJ, it's not meant to be weaponized. It's meant to really protect the accused and also enforce good order and discipline in the military. And that's the main purpose of it. And we can't just willy-nilly just start charging people if we don't have our facts together, or go barging in their house 2 hours after an incident to ask them to take a breathalyzer test. That's just horseshit, in my opinion. Okay, finally, I do appreciate everybody's comments. I try to answer all of them as best as I can. I also appreciate everybody's support to this channel. The discussions and the comments have been fantastic. Most of them I agree with. Some of them I don't. But I also believe in free speech, and it's okay to disagree. It's not a problem. If you disagree with me, that's fine. Because in my view, disagreement is a keystone to free speech. So that's all I got. Stay rugged. Khan out.